Hello again, everyone. Tonight's story is about a widowed human father, his fearless little girl, and the undefeated orc warrior who measured him in the ring. Because sometimes one honest defeat becomes the first step toward trust, protection, and a love neither of them expected to find in winter.
The gate guards looked first at the staff in Orin Vale's hand, then at the child beside him, then at the worn place where his coat had been patched with wool a shade too dark. They looked in that order because men who had guarded northern doors for any length of time knew weapons lied less than faces, and children least of all. Mira stood at his left with one mitten tucked into his fingers and her chin lifted into the wind. Snow dusted the shoulders of her brown cloak. She did not hide behind him. She had never been a hiding sort of child, even when fear would have given her every right. "You answer the stone warlord's call?" the guard asked. He was an orc with spruce-dark skin, a bronze cap on one broken tusk, and a voice that sounded as if it had been stored in a barrel of gravel. "I do," Orin said, "with a cub." Mira's mitten tightened once. "I am 7. The guard looked down at her, and the corner of his mouth moved. 7. A dangerous number." "It can be," Mira said. The guard struck the iron plate of the gate 3 times with the butt of his spear. Chains moved inside the wall. Wood groaned. Warm air rolled out, smelling of coal smoke, boiled barley, horses, wet leather, and something sharp with vinegar. Mira wrinkled her nose. "Breathe through your mouth," Orin murmured. "I am," she whispered. "It tastes worse." He kept his face still. Smiling at the wrong time had started more fights on the frontier than bad cards. The stronghold courtyard opened before them in a wide oval of black stone, high-walled and watchful. At its center lay a training ring covered with reed mats stitched in red cord. Around it waited the other candidates, orc warriors mostly, broad as doorways, painted for trial, weapons displayed without needing to be drawn. One rolled his neck until the bones cracked. One wore wolf jaws at his throat. A woman with blue rings tattooed around both wrists tested the weight of 2 short batons. They stopped only long enough to look at Orin's plain road staff, his tired boots, the child beside him, and then their dismissal became a sound without words. Orin had crossed 6 days of poor road for a notice nailed outside a border mill. The household of Tharic Stone Winter seeks one who can oversee training and protection of youngest warriors and lower hall through uncertain season. Wages, lodging, meal portions for dependents. It had not said glory. It had not said duel. It had said portions for dependents, and those words had more power over a widower than any promise of honor. He led Mira to a stone bench beneath a carved lintel. "Stay where I can see you. Stay where I can see you," she answered. "That is not how instructions work. It is if both people need them." He looked at her a moment. Her hair had escaped its braid near her ears, curling damply against her cheeks, the way her mother's had in rain. He looked away before grief found its full shape. "Fair." Above the courtyard, Tharic Stone Winter stood on a balcony under a beam carved with ravens and boars. He was not the largest orc in the hold, not anymore. Age had drawn mass from his shoulders and put it into the thick cords of his hands, the stiff angle of one old wound, the white streaks in his braided hair. Beside him stood a woman in dark training leathers, arms bare despite the cold. She was tall enough that the balcony rail sat low against her body, skin grey-green like river stones under moss, black hair braided close on one side and bound back with red leather. 2 short horns swept from her brow, a pale scar cut from the corner of her mouth along her jaw. She looked at the courtyard as a hawk looks at a field, not impressed by motion, interested only in what it reveals. "That is Varric," someone muttered near Orin. He had heard the name on the road. Varric, first daughter. Varric, undefeated in ritual duels. Varric, who had ended offers from chiefs' sons, rivals' champions, and one poet from the Salt Coast, by proving that admiration could still be thrown into a trough if it stood too close. Stories made people larger until they became useless. Seeing her now, Orin trusted the silence around her more than the stories. Tharek raised his hand. "You have come because my hall asked for service," he said. "Not a raiding band, not a red winter. Service. The low houses need guarding when hunters ride east. The youngest need training before they are old enough to mistake courage for noise. My daughter will measure you. If you came for silver without judgment, leave now and save her boredom." A few candidates laughed. Varek did not. The bouts began beneath a pale sun. Varek came down into the ring without ceremony and chose a practice axe from the rack, not the largest or most polished, but one heavier toward the head where impatience would be punished. The first challenger charged and struck only air. Varek stepped inside his spear, struck his ribs with the flat of the axe, hooked his ankle, and put him down so hard dust jumped from the mat. The second circled too prettily, and sat down blinking after her shoulder found his chest. The woman with the blue wrist rings lasted longer, forcing Varek to work, and Orin respected them both for it. They moved in linked measures, wood clacking, boots whispering, breath smoking. Varek won by turning a baton lock into a throw, and offered a hand up when it was done. Orin watched. He watched the way he had once watched deer through cedar brush and men through fog. Not the weapon, not the face, but the hinge points where intention became movement. Varek's left hand flexed once before she used the hook of the axe. Old finger, badly healed. She trusted her right foot when changing direction. She disliked noise behind her. She did not fear being hit, but she hated being crowded. Most of all, she learned while moving. A trick used once became a dead thing in her presence. By the 9th bout, the courtyard had stopped laughing. The man with wolf jaws at his neck bloodied her mouth, and she looked at the blood on her thumb as if reading a debt. 4 breaths later, he was face down on the reed, with his arm held at an angle that promised pain, but not a break. Orin thought she could have broken it. She chose not to. That mattered. "Human," Tharek said from the balcony, every face turned. Orin felt Mira's hand at the back of his coat. He did not turn. "Warlord, you have watched 9 bouts without choosing a weapon. I was not certain I had been called to the ring. You crossed the border for my trial. I crossed the border for the work described on your notice. And combat was not implied? Many things are implied by men who expect other men to understand them. It is not always efficient." A ripple moved through the courtyard. Varek's gaze sharpened. "Do you refuse?" Tharek asked. Orin looked at the mat, at the weapon rack, at Mira. She did not plead. That would have been easier. She only watched him with steady eyes, trusting him to know which dangers could be stepped around and which had to be crossed because Winter did not care for dignity. "I do not refuse," he said, "but if this is meant to measure whether I can protect children, I ask that my own not be used to teach me shame." The silence changed. "No one will touch your daughter," Tharek said. Orin unstrapped his ash staff. It was roadwood, cut years ago at a river bend, darkened by oil, weather, and his hand. One end bore dog-tooth scars. The middle was polished from use. Mira touched it once before he lifted it, the small luck they had made together on roads where luck mostly meant checking knots twice. "Do I hold your coat?" she asked. "You sit on it. That is less heroic. Most useful things are." He stepped into the ring in shirt sleeves, feeling the cold find every old injury. Varek waited with the practice axe in one hand. "The rack is there," she said. "I know. That staff is roadwood. It has survived roads. Roads do not strike back. Some do." A few orcs laughed. Varek did not, but something moved at the edge of her mouth. She saluted in the clan fashion, axe haft across her chest, fist over heart. Orin did not know the answer, so he touched the end of his staff to the mat between them and inclined his head. The horn blew. Varric did not rush him. She circled once to see whether he followed with his shoulders. He did not. He let his eyes rest on the center of her chest and kept the rest of her in the blur around it. Hands lied. Faces lied. Feet confessed. Breath betrayed what pride tried to hide. Her first strike was a question, fast enough to bruise, not enough to finish. The axe swept toward his thigh. He stepped back half a pace and let it pass close enough to move his trouser leg. He did not counter. A counter would have told her too much. Her eyes changed. She attacked again, higher, then low, testing the staff. He gave ground in a narrow line, 2 steps, then 1, yielding as he would yield to a boar's first charge while counting the trees behind him. The third exchange came harder. She drove him toward the west edge where light struck his eyes. He let her. She feinted at his ribs, turned her wrist for the hook behind his knee. He dropped the staff not to block the axe, but to touch the mat behind his heel, pivoted around that planted point, and slipped outside her shoulder. For a breath they stood close enough that he smelled iron from her split lip and juniper oil in her hair. He could have struck. He moved away. Varric understood the mercy before the crowd understood the opening. Her nostrils flared once. After that, she came like weather breaking through shutters. High shoulder, low hip, haft jab, hook, elbow. Orin blocked almost none of it cleanly. Blocking strength with weakness was a young man's vanity. He shaved angles. He let the axe slide along the staff instead of stopping it. He stepped into the empty places made by her own force and out before they closed. Twice she struck him, once across the upper arm hard enough to numb his hand, once grazing ribs that would purple by night. He accepted both. Pain was information. A man could spend a life avoiding it and still be ruined by hunger. Varric's breathing deepened. Not fatigue. Interest. She learned too quickly. The second time he planted the staff, she kicked the lower end aside. The second time he gave ground toward light, she shifted shadow behind her. The second time he slipped her shoulder, her elbow weighted, and only the old habit of ducking thorn branches saved his jaw. The mat seams passed beneath his boots, a loose stitch at the north edge, a darker patch where meltwater had dampened reed. Her left hand flexed before the hook. Her right foot trusted the finish, her dislike of being crowded, her pride, not vanity, but knowledge. He let her drive him towards the damp patch. Once, twice. Enough for expectation to settle. The leather axe head clipped his shoulder and spun him half a step. A shout rose. Mira did not shout. Good girl, he thought, and hated that she had to be brave so often. Varric came to end it, cleanly, not cruelly. She stepped in with her right foot, weight committed, axe sweeping to take him behind the knees. It would have worked on a stronger man. It would have worked on a faster man escaping backward. Orin did neither. He stepped in. For the first time, he entered her space fully. His staff struck the inside of her axe haft, not hard, just enough to change its path by 2 fingers. His left hand caught her wrist where the old finger could not close with full strength. His right foot slid over the damp reed and stopped against the seam. He turned his hip away from her power and toward her certainty. Varric's momentum met the place where he had removed himself. Her trusted right foot came down where the mat gave slightly under frost-damp reed. For one breath her body searched for ground that was not where she had promised herself it would be. Orin did not throw her. Stories later would say he did, because stories prefer simple lies. He only opened the door. Varric went through it. She hit the mat on her back with a sound that cut the courtyard in half. Before she could roll, the end of Orin's staff touched the hollow beneath her throat, light as a question. He stepped away at once because standing over a fallen person longer than necessary was a cruelty men mistook for victory. Varric rose. She looked at the damp mat, at his staff, at him. Then the strongest daughter of Tharic Stone Winter lowered herself to one knee, not collapsing, not recovering, kneeling. Her practice axe lay across both palms, held out horizontally, her head bowed only enough that the red leather in her hair fell along her cheek. The courtyard went so quiet, Orin heard a coal crack in a brazier 30 paces away. Mira slid off the bench and stopped at the edge of the ring. Orin had no idea what he was supposed to do. "Varric," Tharic said from the balcony. It was not a command. It was not quite a warning. It was a father speaking a child's name from a place he could not follow. Varric did not lift her head. An old orc woman rose from the side of the yard. She was the one with blue wrist rings, white hair braided with bits of bone, one torn ear holding a brass bell that made no sound as she walked. The crowd parted for her differently than it parted for warriors. "Take the axe," she said quietly. "Should I?" Orin asked. "If you refuse it in public, you shame her." "That is not my wish." "Then take it." He stepped forward and wrapped both hands around the practice axe. Varric released it. Her palms remained open a breath after, as if something of herself had gone with the haft. Then she stood and walked out of the ring through a silence that was not the same silence as before. "What did she do?" Orin asked. The old woman looked at him with eyes bright as river stones. "She said you are worthy." "I did not hear words." "You heard the older language. Worthy of the position?" Her mouth tightened with amusement and pity. "Among other things." They gave him and Mira a room in the lower east hall, 2 narrow beds built into stone and a window slit overlooking the goat pens. It smelled of rushes, smoke, and old winter. To Orin, after haylofts, cart sheds, and one inn where something small had tried to nest in his hair, it was nearly luxury. Mira inspected the blankets, found no fleas, and declared the room acceptable if the goats did not scream at night. "Goats always scream at night," Orin said. "Then we must scream back until they learn manners. We are guests. We can be guestly screamers." He sat on the bed and flexed his bruised hand until feeling returned in a painful wash. Mira came to stand between his knees. "You won," she said. "I did. Why do you look like when we found the fox in the snare and it was already dead?" He breathed in slowly. "Because winning is not always the same as knowing what happened." She knew. "Varric." Mira nodded. She knew what happened. The old woman came after supper with a clay jar of pine sour salve and a strip of clean linen. She entered without knocking, introduced herself as Sura, keeper of names, rights, grudges older than sense, and the warlord's temper when it wandered too near cliffs. She wrapped Orin's swelling arm with fingers that smelled of herbs, and did not pretend not to hurt him. "The knee," he said. "Yes. I was told it means worthy, and other things." "In the old clans," Sura said, "a warrior bested in honest combat could kneel and offer the weapon. It meant, 'I have measured you with my life and found no lie.' It could be given to a shieldmate, a teacher, a rival who had become more than a rival, sometimes before a binding. A binding. Fate binding. Marriage if families, spirits, and practical arrangements did not object too loudly. The gesture is not a wedding. Do not look so pale, but it is the road where weddings used to begin." From the bed, Mira whispered, "Oh." Orin looked at her. "Sleep." "I cannot. You are accidentally engaged." "I am not accidentally anything." Sura made a dry sound. "No, not yet." Orin rubbed both hands over his face. "She did not mean that. Perhaps. That is not comforting. I am not a comfort woman. I am a truth woman. Comfort is what people ask for when truth arrives with muddy boots." Sura tied the bandage off. "Varric has had suitors who wanted to hang her name from their belts, and challengers who wanted to stand taller on her defeat. Today you put her on her back before her clan and stepped away as if victory was not a cup you needed to drain. That is not small to a woman treated as a mountain men either climb or curse. I read a damp mat. You read her." Orin said nothing. Mira's voice came again, softer. Is Varek lonely? Sura turned. Mira had pulled the blanket to her chin. Papa gets quiet like that when people praise him for doing something hard, but nobody asks if he wanted to have to do it. The room held still. Orin looked at the floor because grief had many ambushes, and sometimes one of them wore his child's voice. Yes, Sura said at last. I think she is lonely. Quick note before we continue. If you want hotter and uncensored GL stories, I'll be sharing them on my Patreon page. These are the scenes I can't post here, so check the description for details. The next morning, Orin found Varek alone in the courtyard before dawn, moving through axe forms so slowly they looked like prayer. Frost silvered the reed mats. Her bare arm steamed in the cold, and the bruise where she had struck the mat darkened one shoulder. She stopped without turning. You step quietly for a man with a child. That is why I step quietly. She looked back. Sura spoke to you. She did. About the knee. Yes. And you have come to ask what I meant. I woke early. That is a poor lie. An incomplete truth. Her mouth twitched. Those breed worse. She lowered the axe. When I knelt, I knew what the old gesture meant. I also did not know. That is a difficult thing to do at the same time. Yes. She looked towards the balcony where her father had stood. All my life people have come into rings with me wanting a story. If they won, they would say they conquered me. If they lost, they would call me unnatural, blessed by cruel spirits, anything easier than saying I was better. Most look at my strength and think they have reached the end of me. I did not reach the end of anything. No, you found a door. A mat seam. Do not insult me to protect me. The words struck cleaner than anger. Orin leaned on his staff and answered properly. I saw you disliked being crowded. I saw the old finger. I saw you trusted your right foot when you meant to end a bout. I saw you learn too fast for me to repeat anything twice. I saw that if I tried to overpower you, you would put me down and be right to do it. Varek's hands tightened on the axe. Why did you not strike when you had my shoulder? Because the bout was not a killing. Many men forget that when pride opens its mouth. I am too tired for pride most days. She studied him. That may be the most frightening thing about you. The morning bell rang. Servants crossed the yard with buckets. Children began chasing one another until an older woman caught both by their collars and redirected them toward chores. The world resumed, but not as it had been. The Warlord wants you in the lower yard after food. Varek said, Show what you would teach the young. And you. I want to know if yesterday was luck. It was some luck. Good, she said. Honest men are less boring. The lower yard belonged to the life that kept warriors alive long enough to look impressive. It held washstones, a smoking shed, chopping blocks, a roofed practice space, and hens who moved with the entitlement of tax collectors. 14 young trainees gathered beneath the roof, all squared shoulders and borrowed fierceness. Orin did not shout. He emptied a pouch onto the dirt. 3 pebbles, a bent copper buckle, a feather, a red thread, a rabbit bone, and a button from Mira's old coat. Look, he said. He covered them with cloth. Tell me what you saw. Voices overlapped. By the 5th try, the children stopped trying to be first and began trying to be right. Then he sent them through the yard to find 3 things out of place. They returned with a cracked bucket handle, a loose nail near the chopping block, a strip of cloth caught on a splinter, a hidden hen's nest, and 1 boot nobody claimed. This is guarding? An older girl demanded. Guarding is standing with a spear. Standing with a spear is what people see after guarding has failed quietly enough that everyone needs reassurance. Orin pointed to the loose nail. Who steps there in the dark? Kitchen runners, said a small child. And if a runner cuts a foot? No bread to upper hall, said the boy with the black crest, whose name Mira had learned was Braka. No bread. Someone leaves post to fetch it. Someone else covers 2 doors instead of 1. A gap opens. Trouble rarely knocks on the gate first. It comes through loose nails, tired eyes, missing bread, a dog that barks at the wrong wind. Spears matter. Seeing matters first. The children understood usefulness when adults did not dress it too heavily. By midday they were falling without catching themselves on wrists, walking over frost without making the crunch carry, and arguing over whether fear that warned felt different from fear that lied. Varek watched from a post with folded arms. Sometimes she corrected a grip with one sentence. Once, when an older boy mocked a smaller child for crying after a fall, she lifted him by the back of the tunic until his toes brushed the dirt and said, "Pain is not shame. Making noise instead of learning is." Then she set him down, and the apology came quickly. Varek granted Orin 7 provisional days. The days became shaped. Morning drills, wall walks, meals in the hall, boots drying by hearths. Mira befriended Braka, who believed human children could squeeze through arrow slits and should be studied tactically. Sura taught her to braid cord and told her which herbs stopped bleeding and which made foolish boys vomit. Varek appeared at the edges of Orin's tasks, not constantly, which would have been easier to name, but often enough that her absence became noticeable. She never touched Mira without asking. That mattered. Mira studied Varek as she studied weather signs. "Do your horns hurt when it is cold?" she asked one afternoon while Orin repaired a practice shield and Varek sharpened a knife. Orin closed his eyes. Varek considered. "Not the horns. The place beneath them sometimes. My teeth hurt when wind comes. Because new ones are growing? Because they are dramatic." Varek's mouth moved. Later, at supper, Mira sat beside Varek with her bowl and asked the question that would follow the warrior for days. "Do you always win?" "No." "Everyone says you do." "Everyone is lazy." Mira stirred her barley. "When you are the strongest all the time, who gets to be strong for you?" The hall was noisy enough that few heard it. Orin heard because he heard Mira in crowds. Varek heard because the question went under armor without asking permission. She set down her spoon. "My father," she said, but the answer came too late to be whole. Mira nodded, seeing more than politeness allowed. "But he is tired." Orin closed his eyes. Varek's face barely changed, only the corner of her mouth tightening, her hand flattening on the table. "Yes, he is." Mira seemed to know she had reached the edge of what adults could bear. She pushed her bread toward Varek. "You can have this piece. It has the soft middle." Varek looked at the bread as if it were an oath. Then she took it. "Thank you." The first crisis came 2 nights later with a storm everyone else called ordinary. Orin woke to the absence of a sound. For several breaths he lay still, listening. Wind pressed against the window slit. Mira breathed softly in the next bed. Somewhere deep in the hold a door thudded. There, between gusts, no bell from the lower goat pen. The small bell that had complained every night was silent. He rose, dressed, and reached the lower yard before his second boot was properly tied. The goat gate hung open. A young guard swore the latch must have bounced loose in the wind. Orin crouched by the drift. Snow erased tracks quickly, but not instantly. Goat hooves, a dragging rope, and one set of small boot prints. "Who is missing?" he asked. "What?" "Count the children." The alarm became real after that. The missing child was Ruka, 4 winters old, niece of the head cook. She had followed an escaped goat kid through a cracked drainage passage that led between the inner and outer walls toward an old watch tunnel, half collapsed 2 seasons ago. Varek arrived with snow in her hair and no cloak. "Where?" Orin pointed. "Through there." A guard said, "We need axes. Break the outer grate." "No," Orin said. "You bring the drift down and bury the cut." The guard rounded on him, fear choosing anger because it was easier to hold. "You know our walls now?" "I know snow pressed between stone." Varek looked once at the passage, then at him. Can you follow? Yes. I come. So do I, said the guard. No, Orin said. You are too broad. If snow has narrowed the cut, you scrape the sides and bring more down. Send men to the far end by the north tower with ropes and blankets. Quietly. No shouting unless you want her crawling toward the wrong sound. The guard bristled. Varric said, Do it. Mira appeared wrapped in Orin's coat, face white in lantern light. Small children hide when big voices come, she said. I know you know. I am saying it so everyone else hears. Varric looked at her, then at the guards. No shouting. The drainage passage scraped Orin's back and soaked his elbows with meltwater. He went first because he fit better, and because he could read the signs before Varric disturbed them. Behind him she made herself smaller by discipline alone, horns nearly grazing stone. Twice Orin stopped to listen. The second time he heard a goat's thin clatter and a child making soft nonsense sounds to keep fear from growing teeth. Ruka, Varric called. Orin touched her wrist at once. She went still. Soft. He whispered. Mira was right. When Varric spoke again, her voice changed so completely he almost did not know it. Ruka, it is Varric. Do not move fast. They found the child wedged beneath an old beam with the goat kid clutched to her chest, trapped behind a fan of rubble. Blood darkened one small palm. Her lips were bluish. I caught him, Ruka said. You did, Varric answered. He is stupid. Yes, I followed stupid. Orin studied the stones. The beam carried weight. Move the wrong rock and the passage would settle in one hard sigh. Varric's breath changed. No, he said. I can lift the beam. You can. Then the stones above come down. I can hold it. Not with a child under it. Her eyes burned. We cannot leave her. I did not say leave. He lay flat and looked beneath the lowest gap. Narrow, but not impossible. Not for him if he exhaled and did not mind losing skin. He tied a rope around his chest and gave Varric the end. You anchor me. If it shifts, then pull. If I pull, I may break you. If you do not pull, stones may bury us both. Her jaw tightened. You speak as if those are fair choices. Most choices are not fair. They are only ours. He crawled under. The cold there was intimate. Stones scraped the bruise on his shoulder. Panic rose when his ribs lodged between rock and frozen earth. He put it away. Later, if there was later. He exhaled until his chest emptied and pushed forward. Ruka stared at him. You are Mira's papa. I am. Are you stuck too? Not as a long-term plan. He looped the small rope under her arms, careful of the cut hand. Then he looped the goat because he knew she would fight rescue if the animal stayed. Practicality was tenderness with its sleeves rolled up. Child first, he called. Slow. Varric pulled with the control of a mill wheel turned by hand. Ruka slid through the gap. The goat followed, bleating insults at architecture. Then the beam shifted, a small crack above Orin's head, a dusting of ice against his cheek, pressure changing as old stones remembered gravity. Orin, Varric said. He began to reverse. The gap did not care that leaving mattered more than entering. His ribs caught. The rope tightened. Slack, he said through his teeth. It came instantly. He twisted, exhaled, pressed his palms into frozen mud. The stone cracked louder. Then Varric's hand came through the gap. Not far, just enough, fingers open, impossible, there. Orin reached. Their hands caught. She did not pull at once. Good. If she had, his shoulder might have stayed in the wall. She waited until he turned, until he made himself narrower by will and pain, then drew him out with strength so measured it felt less like being dragged than being believed. He came free in a rush of snow and breath. Behind him the stones settled where his legs had been. For several moments he lay on his back in the tunnel, staring up at Varric. Snow clung to her lashes. One hand still gripped his. You are bleeding, she said. Likely, You are a fool. Also likely. I told you no. I heard. That is not the same as listening. No. Anger lit her face, but under it was something raw, frightened, and with nowhere to go. Orin knew that translation. He had spoken it many times over Mira's sleeping head. Ruka? Alive, cold, cursing the goat. Good child. They emerged into the storm to a crowd that had forgotten how to be proud. Ruka was wrapped in blankets on Sura's lap, clutching the goat. Mira held a warmed stone in both mittens. When she saw Orin, she walked to him and pressed it into his hands. You found her. We found her. She looked at Varric. You pulled him out? Yes. Varric said, Good. After that, the hold made room for Orin without seeming to decide to. The head cook put extra meat in his bowl with the grim face of someone settling a debt she intended to keep settling until he could no longer fit under stones. The young guard with the latch apologized by repairing it before dawn and leaving the new ironwork where Orin would see. Tharic said little, but his eyes lingered on Orin differently. Varric avoided him for half a day. He let her. There were many kinds of silence. Some were walls, some were bridges under construction. He found her in the weapons shed, rewrapping the haft of the practice axe she had offered him after the duel. The shed smelled of oil, leather, ash wood, and cold iron. Light came through plank gaps in pale stripes. When I was 11, she said before he could ask anything careful, I followed a raiding party after my father told me I was too young. A storm came. I lost them and broke 2 fingers falling into a ravine. She flexed her left hand. My father found me because a human scout with a border envoy saw one broken twig near a stream and told him I had gone east. My father did not believe him. The scout said, Then lose your daughter west if pride keeps you warm. Orin's breath slowed. Was the scout named Eamon Vale? Varric looked up. My uncle. He once came home with a story about an orc girl who bit a healer hard enough to leave a scar. Varric stared. Then she laughed. One rough burst she seemed to regret immediately. I did bite him. He deserved it. He touched the fingers. Then yes. The laughter changed the air, not softening it but making it breathable. They spoke then of practical things, because practical things were safer and often more honest. The latch, the tunnel, the children's drills, the old wound in Tharac's shoulder that Varric mentioned only as the old wound. She showed him how the clan marked training weapons for balance with tiny cuts near the butt. He showed her how to wrap a staff grip so rain would not blister the palm. Their hands crossed over the same length of ash wood, not touching until once they did, by accident or fatigue, or because neither moved away quickly enough. Her skin was warmer than he expected. His thumb brushed an old scar on her knuckle. They both continued studying the staff as if the grain had become fascinating. On the 7th day, Tharic summoned Orin to the high room above the hall. Banners hung from beams, dark with smoke. A map of the northern approaches lay weighted with stones. The Warlord sat in a carved chair that looked less like a throne than a burden made by craftsmen. You have done the work, Tharic said. I have begun it. That answer is why you will continue. Orin stood still. Relief came tangled with caution, and the shame of wanting something visibly. For how long? Through winter. At Thor we speak again. Wages as posted. Child portion. Lodging. Repair allotment for those boots before Sura burns them as mercy. They have months left. They have memories left, not months. Despite himself, Orin smiled. Tharic's humor faded. Varric knelt to you. Yes. You know now what that might mean. I know what Sura told me. Sura tells more truth than is convenient and less than she thinks. He looked toward the fire. When Varric was born, a storm took the East Hall roof. By 5, she climbed walls. By 9, she broke boys' noses. By 12, she tracked elk over stone better than half my hunters. I was proud. Pride is sweet poison. I made her proof that my blood was strong, Proof that after my sons died, the clan still had iron. She became good at being proof. Orin thought of Varek in the ring, of people seeing her strength and thinking they had reached the end. She loves you. I know. That makes it worse. Yes. She has refused every binding put before her. I allowed it because no one was worthy, and because some part of me was glad to keep my strongest blade in my hall. Fathers can make selfishness sound like protection. Chiefs are better at it. I have no claim on her. No, you have a question standing between you. There is a difference. I have Mira. My hall has seen. And Lisa, the dead wife. My wife, Orin said, not sharply, but enough. Tharic inclined his head. Your wife. The fire cracked. I do not know what I am ready for. Orin said, good. Again with grim approval. Certainty is for boys before their first winter and fools before their last. You will not be pushed. But hear this. My daughter does not kneel lightly. If she gave you confusion, it is because something true outran her understanding. Do not punish her for that. Do not worship her for it either. She has had enough men make idols from pieces of her they wanted to own. Orin met his eyes. I would not. The second crisis came with clear weather, which was why Orin distrusted it. A supply sled from the eastern stores failed to arrive after 3 days of open sky. Tharic wanted 6 mounted warriors. Varek wanted to lead them. Orin studied the map and asked why the route passed under old Cedar Ridge when the lower stream road was longer but safer. Ridge Road is faster, a hunter said. For whom? Orin asked. Loaded sleds in fresh snow, with 2 oxen, under cedars heavy from last week's storm? The room turned toward him. If the sled did not come, he said, touching the map. Trees may have come down. If trees came down, mounted warriors add noise and weight beneath loaded branches. If raiders wait, they expect warriors on the road. If no raiders wait, haste still breaks legs. Send 3 on snowshoes through the stream cut. Send 2 above the ridge to look before entering. Leave horses. Varek studied the map. I know the upper way. Of course you do. Tharic muttered. I take Orin, she said. No, Orin said at the same time Tharic said, yes. They looked at each other. Orin thought of Ruka's blood on stone, Varek's hand reaching through darkness, Lisa once telling him caution without courage was only fear wearing a clean shirt. I can go, but not because anyone thinks I am eager to prove yesterday again. Varek's gaze held his. No one who watched you crawl under stone thinks you are eager for proof. They left before dawn. Varek, Orin, Harl the bronze-tusked guard, and Egra, a narrow-faced hunter who moved over snow as if born from it. The world beyond the walls was remade in white and blue. Pines bent under heavy loads. Their snowshoes whispered over crust. Varek did not force pace. She trusted Orin when he signaled twice to stop. Once for a hollow where water ran beneath snow, once for a boot track that did not belong to their party. They found the first ox dead beneath fallen cedars. Not blade work. Weight. The sled lay tipped, one runner cracked, barrels of meal broken into the snow. One driver was dead under a branch. A second trail of blood led down slope. The third had left boot marks away from the road, limping or carrying weight. A sound came from below the ridge. Not a call, a knock, 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. Orin knew the pattern because he taught it to children. 3 meant here. 2 meant alive if you wanted to. Varek moved, then stopped and looked at him. That look did something to Orin he had no defense against. In the ring she had learned him. In the tunnel she had trusted him because there had been no time not to. Here, in daylight, with her own people under snow and her strength begging for direction, she looked to him before force. Slow, he said. The pack under the trees may have bridged. They found the second sled worker in a hollow beneath interlaced branches, alive but pinned by the leg. Beside her, the missing ox trembled in tangled harness. Egra went after the third worker's trail, while Harl began freeing the animal. Freeing the woman required everything Orin and Varek had learned of each other. He read which branches carried weight, which could be cut, which would spring. Varek held what no human could hold, bracing a cedar limb with her shoulder while Harl slid a support under it. Orin crawled close to tie rope around the trapped leg, fingers numbing. Once the branch shifted, and Varek took the weight with a sound torn from deep in her chest. "Move," she said. "Not yet." "Orin, not yet." Her eyes flashed, but she held. When the final cut was made, the branch rose by a hand, enough for Orin to draw the woman free. Only then did Varek let the cedar drop. It hit the snow with a heavy whoomp. She sank to one knee. For one terrible second, Orin thought she was hurt. He was beside her before caution caught him. "Varek." She waved him off, breathing hard. "Shoulder." He saw it then. Not broken, but strained. The kind of injury pride could turn permanent. He crouched in front of her. "Let me see. You always say things as if they are choices. They are, unless you are unconscious. And if I refuse? I describe your foolishness accurately to Sura. That is low. I am not honorable in medicine." She nodded once. He opened the edge of her vest and pressed careful fingers along the joint. She stared over his shoulder. When his thumb reached the swollen place, her hand shot out and caught his wrist. Not to stop him, to anchor herself. "Not broken," he said. "Do not sound disappointed. I had plans for a lecture. You may still have one. It might distract me from wanting to bite you." "Bite Harl. He is closer to your size," Harl said from several paces away. "I object without confidence." Varek huffed a laugh, then winced. Orin bound the shoulder and tied her arm against her body for the walk back. She glared at the sling. "I look like a child. You look like someone who wants the use of her arm next month." Worse. They returned at dusk with the injured alive, the dead named, and what supplies could be salvaged. The stronghold gates opened into torchlight. People poured into the courtyard. The head cook cried without seeming aware. Tharek stood at the stair with Sura beside him, gaze going first to the rescued, then to Varek's bound arm, then to Orin. This time the silence did not confuse Orin. It made room. That night, after broth had been served and the dead driver's name spoken, Orin sat by the low hearth with Mira asleep against his side. Varek lowered herself beside him carefully, her arm still bound. "Mira?" she asked. "Asleep." She fought it. She considers sleep a negotiation. Like her father. Her mother was worse. Varek looked at the child's hand fisted in Orin's sleeve. "When she asked who is strong for me, I thought of it for days. I hated the question. Then I hated that I hated it." She leaned her head against the bench. Quick note before we continue. If you want hotter and uncensored orc-bound fantasy romance stories, I'll be sharing them on my Patreon page. These are the deeper and more intense scenes I can't post here, so check the description for details. "I have been useful so long I mistook being needed for being known. My father needed me, the clan needed me, suitors needed the idea of me, challengers needed the measure of me. I did not think to ask what I needed, it seemed indulgent." "Need is not indulgence," Orin said. "No, it is weather. Pretending not to have it does not keep you dry." She turned to him. "Who is strong for you?" Mira breathed between them. "No one," he said before he could make it prettier. "That is not accusation. It is old arrangement. Lisa and I were strong in turns. Then she was sick, and I was strong because someone had to be. Then she died, and Mira was 3, and I did not know how to stop. People admire a man who does not fall apart when a child needs breakfast. They do not always notice when breakfast becomes the rope tying him upright." Varek's jaw moved as if against pain. "I noticed." He looked at her. "In the ring. Before you lifted your staff, you looked at Mira. Not for permission, for the shape of the world. I knew you would not fight for pride, because pride was not what stood behind you. The fire collapsed inward, sending sparks up the chimney. When you knelt, he said, I was afraid. I know. I am still afraid. I know. That is not refusal. Varek's unbound hand lay on the floor between them. After a moment she turned it palm up. A warrior's hand. Broad, scarred, the small finger crooked, knuckles marked by years of impact. Around her wrist was a cord Mira had braided that afternoon from red, black, and undyed wool, given with the explanation that it meant come back safe, do not forget this house, and I worked hard. Orin set his hand in hers. No horn sounded. No old woman interpreted, though he suspected Sura was awake somewhere within smelling distance of significance. Varek's fingers closed around his, not tightly, just enough to make contact a fact. Mira stirred, opened one eye, saw their hands, and closed it again with the faintest expression of satisfaction, as if adults had finally completed a task she had assigned days before. In the morning, Tharak called the household to the courtyard. Snow had stopped. The air smelled of smoke, wet leather, and the bright metal scent that comes after hard weather. Orin stood near the trainees with Mira at his side. Varek stood across the ring, her right arm bound beneath a dark tunic, Mira's cord on her wrist. Sura stood beside the Warlord with a face too innocent to trust. Tharak spoke of the rescued sled workers. He named the dead driver, Baron Two Fires, and the courtyard answered by striking fists over hearts. He spoke of repairs to the ridge road, of winter discipline, of watches doubled where weather lied. Then he looked at Orin. Orin Vale remains as winter trainer and watcher of the lower household, he said. His child Mira Vale is under hall protection as guest kin. Anyone who questions this may bring the question to me, my daughter, or Sura, in that order, if they are wise. Sura looked disappointed by the advice. The clan accepted the decree not with cheers, but with the deeper sound of a world-changing shape. Boots shifting, breath released, heads lowering in acknowledgement. Orin felt Mira's hand slip into his. He squeezed once. Then Varek stepped forward. She carried no axe. In her left hand, awkward because of the bound shoulder, she held Orin's ash staff. A murmur rose as she came to the center of the ring and planted it upright in the mat. Then she lowered herself to one knee. Not like the first time. The first had been shock, ancient meaning outrunning thought. This was deliberate. Slower. Witnessed by her father, by Sura, by children who had stopped fidgeting because even they felt the weight settle. She did not bow her head. She looked at Orin. I measured you once by combat, she said. I measured you again by work, by fear, by children kept warm, by doors noticed before they broke, by strength given without demand. The first knee said you are worthy. This one says I was not mistaken. The courtyard held its breath. Orin could not move for a moment. Mira leaned against his side, trembling either from cold or something larger. He looked at Tharak. The warlord's face was carved still, but his eyes shone with grief and pride, braided too tightly for any knife to separate. Sura gave Orin a look that said, very clearly, do not stand there like a post forever. He stepped into the ring. Each pace sounded louder than it should have. He stopped before Varek. His staff stood between them, old roadwood touched now by her hand, by the hold silence, by meanings he had not carried when he cut it at a river bend years ago. I do not know all your rights, he said. I know. I do not know what this becomes. I know. I know I am not alone when you stand near me. Her face changed. Not much. Enough. He took the staff from the mat. Then, because he had no axe to offer, and no clan gesture old enough to answer hers, he did the truest thing he had. He lowered himself to one knee as well, facing her. The sound through the courtyard was not a gasp, not a cheer, not protest. It was something older than approval. Recognition, perhaps. Relief. Orin held the staff across both palms and offered it to Varek. "This has brought me through bad roads. It has kept dogs off, found depth in snow, held my weight when I was too tired to trust my legs. It is not a warrior's axe." Varek's eyes lowered to the staff. "It is what I have," he said. She reached with her unbound hand and closed her fingers around the ash. For a moment they remained that way, both kneeling, both holding the old road staff between them while winter light came over the wall. Orin thought of Lisa's cracked blue cup, of Eamon Vale and a broken twig, of Ruka under stone, of Mira's small hand in his, of Varek's palm reaching through darkness when the passage began to fall. He thought some roads did not announce themselves until you were already walking them. He thought worthiness was a frightening word because it asked not only whether someone could stand beside you, but whether you were willing to be seen while they did. Varek rose first, then she offered him her hand. He took it. She pulled him to his feet carefully, because his ribs were still bruised, and because she knew now that strength could be exact. He did not let go when standing no longer required it. Neither did she. Behind them, Braca whispered loudly, "Does this mean Mira is allowed to command the goats?" Mira whispered back, "I already do." The courtyard broke, not into mockery but into laughter, warm and startled and alive. Even Tharek covered his mouth, though whether to hide a cough or a smile, no one was foolish enough to ask. Sura's brass earbell trembled without ringing. Mira came into the ring and took Varek's free hand, as if it had always belonged within reach. Varek looked down, startled for the last time that morning, and then closed her fingers with the same care she had used to pull Orin from beneath the stones. Together, the three of them stepped out of the ring, leaving the reed mats behind them, marked by footprints, old defeats, and the first quiet shape of something no one needed to name before it began.